Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into something atmospheric. You're standing barefoot on a crooked cobblestone alley in 18th century Paris, the torchlight barely slicing through the night fog. The wind's whisper carries something more than just chill. There's a murmur of putrid sweetness, a musk of layered centuries, and a thick, buttery aftertaste of rot. Your nose twitches. You try not to gag. Welcome to the City of Light, back when it smelled more like a poorly maintained zoo than romance. Before you get too comfortable, remember, you probably won't survive this. At least not without developing a temporary case of olfactory amnesia. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I always love to see who's drifting into dreamland with us. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The hour is late, and the city should be resting, but Paris never quite sleeps. Neither do its smells. You start your walk near Rue de la Mortellerie, and the air has the clarity of an open sewer pipe lined with warm cheese. A horse clops past, tail twitching over a stream of its own making. No one bats an eye. You instinctively step over the puddle, but the damage is already done. Your sandal catches a splash, and your nostrils learn betrayal. The scent palette is almost operatic, layered, dramatic, and entirely out of tune. There's manure, fresh, cured, and somewhere in between, there's grease, street stew, burnt hair from a night market brazier, and the ghost of fish long since unsold. And most insidiously, there's humanity, unwashed, unfiltered, and unmistakably alive. Historians still argue whether the average Parisian could truly smell how bad it was. Maybe it's like living next to a train. You stop hearing it. Or maybe they noticed and just didn't have time to care. Survival had a stronger scent than shame. Your eyes water slightly as you pass a pile of rotting cabbage next to a wheelbarrow of skinned rabbits. The juxtaposition is not metaphorical. It's lunch prep. No refrigeration. If the meat walks on, its own. That's how you know it's ready to cook. You take refuge in a stone archway, where an old beggar is curled up in what looks like a potato sack. He doesn't move. But you realize he's awake. He just knows better than to breathe too deep. A sleepy mutt near his feet scratches itself, sending a wave of fleas into the night like a dandelion puff. Above you, a window creaks open. You look up. A delicate porcelain pot tilts, tips, and unleashes a cascade of unknown liquid down onto the stones, missing you by inches. You blink, stunned. No one yells, "Watch out!" No one apologizes. This is just how the city operates. It's not just the poor streets that reek either. Even the wealthier quarters carry their own unique blend of fancy decay. Rose water can only cover so much. Musk was popular, but that just meant everyone smelled vaguely like a goat that had spent the day in a brothel. And yes, that's historically accurate. You pass a baker closing up for the night. The sourdough scent is a rare reprieve, comforting in its simplicity. Then you catch a whiff of the alley behind the bakery and realize where the sour in the dough might really come from. Spoiler, it's not lemon quirky detail. The city had laws about when you were allowed to fling your chamber pot out the window. You had to yell "Gardez l'eau," a very French way of saying, "Look out for the pea." Of course, most people didn't bother, or they whispered it. Passive-aggressive sanitation at its finest. The bell of Notre Dame tolls faintly in the background. It smells different near the cathedral. Stone and incense, yes, but also the thick breath of thousands of bodies packed into mass earlier. You can still feel the steam of piety clinging to the pews. One time it was so bad that a priest passed out mid-sermon. Not from divine revelation, just the sheer wall of human funk. And still, in all this, you find a strange rhythm. Like the city is exhaling night by night all its pent-up stink, and somehow it's alive. Gross, but alive. You start to get used to it. That's how it gets you. That's how it got them. You walk on. A cat darts between shadows. You catch a burst of something yeasty and almost nice. Could be bread, could be a brewer's barf pile. Hard to tell. You don't check. You just keep going, shoes sticking faintly, with each step. Beneath the surface of this gag-inducing smellscape, there's something weirdly comforting. Maybe it's knowing you're not alone in your suffering. Everyone here smells, even the nobles, especially the nobles. And soon, we'll meet them too. But for now, keep walking. Try breathing through your mouth. It helps, slightly. You keep trudging, nose still offended, when a sudden squelch under your heel reminds you. There is no escape. Whatever that was, it was soft, damp, and now part of your shoe's emotional history. You don't look down. You just accept. Because in 18th century Paris, what's underfoot is nobody's business and everybody's problem. Now let's talk about sewers. Or more accurately, the fever dream version of what pre-modern people thought sewers should be. See, in theory, the Romans had already solved this problem with aqueducts and underground drains, like a civilized species. But Paris? Paris decided to skip the homework for about 1,000 years. At best, the city had medieval drainage ditches that operated like passive-aggressive roommates. Technically there, but never when you needed them. You're walking along, Rue Saint-Honoré now, and the air has shifted from barnyard to something like burnt pickles in a wet sock. This is the scent of gray water, or as you might call it, everything that has no business flowing through a city street. Dishwater, bathwater, blood vomit, and the occasional regrettable family secret, all coursing through shallow stone channels that crackle underfoot when dry or bubble ominously after rain. Historians still argue whether the early Parisian sewer system was ever intended to carry human waste. Technically, it wasn't. Those channels were meant for runoff, rain, market leftovers, excess mud. But people are people. When you give them a convenient groove, they'll use it for whatever needs dumping. So of course, everything ended up in there anyway. And here's the kicker. Most homes didn't connect to anything underground. Toilets, when they existed, were glorified buckets in wooden closets called guard-robes, and emptying them was the user's responsibility. Many took the shortest route out the window. In wealthier homes, a servant did the honors. In poorer ones, well, gravity did. A quirky fact. There was a job title for people who cleaned this mess up, vidangeurs, or night soil men. Imagine being so committed to human suffering that you carry other people's poop in barrels through a city that hates you. They wore long coats and big hats, not for fashion, but to deflect splashes. Occupational hazard meets haute couture. The smell along these narrow back lanes is especially aggressive in the summer. Sun bakes the slurry into a nose-peeling crust. Dogs roll in it, children play near it, everyone pretends this is fine. You pass a tavern where patrons drink outside because the smell inside is worse. That's right, the street is the better option. Now, remember the Seine? The city's artery? Think of it like the town's great flushing toilet. Every gutter, every channel, every act of disposal found its way into the river eventually, including you if you annoyed the wrong people. But even in its filth, the Seine was essential. People washed clothes, bathed, drank, and dumped bodies in it, all with the casual acceptance of a city married to its own contradictions. You pass a laundry barge moored to the riverbank. It smells like boiled socks and raw poultry. Women slap, garments on wooden boards, their laughter rising above the slap, slap, slap rhythm. One reaches into the water and pulls out a fish. She looks surprised. You're surprised. The fish is probably horrified. You step back onto the street. A boy with a cart is pushing barrels of something thick and greenish down the slope. A label on the side reads soap ingredients. You do not ask questions. You do not make eye contact. It's hard to imagine now, but Paris at this time had a population of nearly 600,000 people, almost all crammed into tight quarters with no meaningful plumbing. You pass a tall tenement where laundry hangs like surrender flags between buildings. You look up and briefly wonder, how do they reach those clotheslines? Then a pot empties out the third-floor window and answers your question. Some risks are built into the system. The city's drainage problems were so legendary that Napoleon himself, years later, would commission a proper sewer overhaul. Until then, you're just sloshing through a living petri dish with cobblestones. The sound your shoes make is less tap-tap and more squelch-flop. Welcome to the pre-bleach era. You try breathing through your mouth again. It doesn't help. The taste is now part of your soul. Every alley has its own unique bouquet. One smells like stewed cabbage left in a boot. Another has a spicy tang of ammonia and burnt feathers. You start naming them in your head like perfumes. Rue du Spleen by Misfortune. Eau de Gutter, number 5. Here's the wild part. Some residents defended this system. They believed the constant movement of waste, gravity pulling everything downward, helped prevent disease. Better out than bottled up, they'd say, not understanding that their out was seeping into their in. Historians still debate whether this was willful ignorance or just practical desperation. You pause near a fountain where a few children are drinking. The water looks okay. But then you see a dog wade in, drink, then relieve itself. The children keep drinking. The cycle of life. Paris style. As night deepens, you reach one of the lowest points in the old city, where all the runoff collects. It's not a pond. It's a mistake with puddle-like qualities. The stench is dense enough to chew. You tiptoe around it, silently vowing to burn your clothes in the morning. But even here, even ankle-deep in regrets, the city hums. You hear distant music, the clink of glass, the low murmur of lovers. People live in this. People fall in love in this. They raise families, build legacies, write poetry. Smell has become wallpaper. It's just there, and eventually, it will be gone. But not tonight. Tonight, you breathe in centuries of fermentation and march forward like the champ you didn't ask to be. The night drapes over Paris like a moist wool blanket left in a puddle. You move slower now, partly because the cobblestones have turned unpredictable, partly because your nose is in open rebellion. The scentscape here is more interactive. It's not just passive decay anymore. It's aggressive, it's coordinated, and it's airborne. You duck into a quieter side street, hoping for a reprieve. Instead, you walk straight into someone's bathroom. Not literally, but figuratively, and with your whole face. Because in 18th century Paris, privacy was an exotic concept, and toilets were more a vibe than a location. People handled their business wherever gravity and decency allowed, and often neither was present. The system, if you can call it that, involved chamber pots. If you were lucky enough to own one, you used it in your home, bedside, under the table, or even in the hallway. When full, it got emptied out the window with the aforementioned shout, "Gardez l'eau!" But most people skipped the announcement, especially at night. Maybe they were shy. Maybe they knew the splash radius would do all the talking. So now, you're standing at the edge of a 3-foot puddle that did not arrive via rainfall. A slurred voice from above mumbles something you choose not to translate. You shuffle away quickly. Somewhere a door creaks open, and a man saunters out carrying a small wooden seat with a hole in the middle. He places it right there on the sidewalk. You make sharp eye contact. He shrugs. You both move on. This wasn't unusual. The line between public and private defecation was blurry, like a sidewalk chalk drawing after a thunderstorm. Some buildings had communal toilets, but these often overflowed or were locked at night. So the streets did double duty, and when nature called, it usually used a megaphone. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of open defecation was due more to poverty or urban planning failure. The answer, of course, is yes. Poverty meant you couldn't afford regular cleaning or a chamber pot. Poor infrastructure meant even if you had one, emptying it without causing a scandal was a full-time job. One truly fringe detail? Some buildings had internal stairwells specifically designed with sloped floors and a central drain to encourage efficient liquid evacuation. In other words, it was a poop chute. And you thought your old apartment's plumbing was bad. You pass a wooden stall nestled between two crumbling walls. It's a pay toilet, rare but not unheard of. For a few sous, you get a semi-private box and a vague promise that the bucket inside was recently changed. The attendant outside is snoring, and the door's cracked open. You don't go in. You've made enough mistakes for one night. Further down, you find a square where children are playing a game that involves stones and yelling. One trips, lands face first in something best left unexamined, and pops up laughing. His mother wipes him off with a rag that smells like fermented socks. He squeals, and they keep playing. Adaptation is a powerful thing. Paris had its own scent-based class system, and nowhere was it more evident than in bathroom habits. The wealthier classes had indoor commodes, ornate wooden boxes with porcelain basins and sometimes even perfumed lids. Think throne in the most literal sense. But even these had to be emptied, often by a servant who had the misfortune of being lowest in rank and highest in exposure. You round a corner into a more upscale neighborhood, Marais, perhaps. The air shifts again. Still bad, but different. Less raw sewage, more composted disappointment. You pass a grand home with gilded windows and catch the glint of chandelier light inside. A lady in a powdered wig sips wine near the balcony. Below her, a puddle glistens faintly. You don't need to guess what it is, because here's the twist. Nobles had more access to toilets, but less inclination to use them properly. When you wear 6 layers of brocade and lace, disrobing becomes a military operation. So many aristocrats used chamber pots during dinner parties, sliding them under the table like some grotesque musical chairs. One man even had a folding travel bidet he brought to salons. Classy. It's no surprise, then, that streets reeked not just of poverty, but of entitlement. A duke's waist and a beggar's blended seamlessly on the pavement. The smells didn't discriminate, and neither did the rats. Another odd little tidbit? Paris once had a law stating that every household needed to dispose of its waste at least 20 meters from the Seine. This was ignored with such Olympic consistency that the law might as well have been a bedtime story. You pass a cluster of barrels lined up along the curb. They're marked for collection, but no one's collected anything. Flies hover in ecstatic spirals. The smell here is sharp, vinegary, somewhere between vinegar and despair. A cat hops up and peers inside one barrel. You both recoil. There were efforts, of course. Nascent public health campaigns, edicts about waste removal, even fines. But enforcement was laughable, and compliance was optional. Paris was bursting at the seams, and every inch of it was soaked in bodily proof. You try to imagine the logistics. Carrying a sloshing chamber pot down 6 flights of stairs, dodging dogs, beggars, and your neighbor's equally ambitious pot, all to empty it into a street gutter, hoping no one important saw you. It was a ballet of degradation, and yet people survived, thrived even. Children were born into this system, grew up playing in it, laughing through it, learning to distinguish between safe mud and bad mud. You, of course, just step in everything and hope your immune system does CrossFit. The night deepens. You pause near a wall that's been repeatedly stained by what you now understand to be civic use. Someone's carved a poem into the stone, maybe with a knife or just pure bitterness. It reads, "Here I stand where nobles pee, not so different, you and me." You nod in agreement, then take one careful step back. The city doesn't get quieter, just more intimate. Nightfall peels back the city's layers like an onion that's been buried in soup. What's underneath is mushy, complex, and makes your eyes sting. You wander deeper into the heart of Paris, where the buildings huddle tighter and the air feels thicker. Here's where it really hits you. The streets themselves smell alive. Not metaphorically, organically. The cobblestones are seasoned. Decades of drippings, sweepings, droppings, and smearings have woven together into something that is no longer just dirty. It is fermented existence. You pause at a corner where three alleys meet in a grimy stone cul-de-sac. This intersection smells like what happens when a cheese wheel falls in love with a corpse and they have a baby made of hot rain. There's a merchant's cart abandoned nearby, piled with wilted produce and a sack of something leaking down the sides. You guess. Onions. You pray it's onions. A mule passes with buckets hanging off its sides. The buckets slosh, and you're not entirely sure what's inside. Water? Wine? Something illegal? Doesn't matter. As it lumbers past, you catch a gust of tailwind and discover it was definitely not wine. Historians still argue whether the sensory overload of Parisian streets contributed to a kind of social numbness, an unspoken agreement to ignore the obvious. How else do you explain the fact that people ate, argued, kissed, and prayed within arm's reach of puddles that could turn milk sour just by proximity? Let's talk about the everyday aroma medley. At any given time, you could be assaulted by a dozen overlapping smell notes: boiled cabbage, wet leather, burnt sugar, horse sweat, garlic, and something that might be fish, or might be your own boots giving up. The city was a stew, and you were the spoon. One fringe tidbit? Parisian tanners, those responsible for making leather, worked just outside the city walls because their process involved soaking hides in urine and animal brains. Not figurative madness, literal animal brains. They called it baiting, and believed it made the hides soft and pliable. You'd believe it too if you were holding a skin marinated in goat pee. The smell didn't stay outside the city. Wind was democratic. So even if you lived nowhere near the tanners, the breeze brought their work into your parlor like a ghost with boundary issues. You enter a square where vendors are packing up after a day's sales. Rotten fruit is smeared across the cobbles, in a sticky rainbow. One woman is collecting leftover fish heads in a basket. Whether for soup or sorcery, you're not sure. A child licks something off a stick and offers you a bite. You politely decline and make a mental note to cancel dinner. But it's not just decay you're smelling. It's ambition. Everyone's trying to cover up the stink. They dab themselves with flower water, chew herbs, burn incense. It's like watching someone try to Febreze a haunted house. You pass a man in velvet trousers who smells faintly of lavender and disappointment. He tips his hat. His wig tilts dangerously. You nod back, holding your breath. Now imagine this. It rains. Not hard, but enough. A lazy drizzle. It should be refreshing. It is not. Because when it rains in Paris, the city exhales. Everything the sun had kindly crusted over, it wakes up. The dried urine, the congealed stew spills, the layer cake of dust and excrement, it all turns fluid again. The scent rises like steam from a microwave burrito. You taste it in the back of your throat. You duck under an awning next to a butcher's shop. The window has a decorative pig head smiling at you with too many teeth. Inside, the floor is covered in sawdust meant to soak up blood, but now it's soggy and pink. The smell is half raw meat, half wet barn. You're pretty sure something moved behind the counter. You pretend you didn't see it. Quirky fact? Some streets had informal names based on how bad they smelled. One was nicknamed Rue de la Fosse aux Chiens, Dog Pit Street. Another was known for its cheese vendors and was lovingly called Stink Alley by locals who'd built up a fondness for nasal punishment. You pass a group of students reciting poetry near a lamppost. One of them smells aggressively of clove oil, which was used to mask dental problems. He smiles at a girl, whose powdered wig is taller than your hopes. They giggle. Somewhere in the background, a man retches into a gutter. Romance is alive. You step around another puddle that gleams under torchlight. This one is bubbly. You do not ask. You walk faster. People used to say that you could tell the time of day by the smell. Morning had a hint of baking bread, and overnight, slop. Noon brought cooked meats, spilled wine, and melting sugar. By evening, everything started to sour, ferment, and blend. And by night was pure funk, a carnival of decomposition with occasional hints of flowers from someone's desperate perfume. You reach a fountain and watch as a servant fills a jug. The water flows from a lion's mouth, chipped and green with age. She dips her hand in and drinks. So do you, reluctantly. It tastes like stone and history. It tastes better than the air. You sit on the edge for a moment. A breeze picks up. It brings you a scent you don't hate. Rosemary, perhaps, or dry hay. You look up. Someone has hung a sachet of herbs in a window. It flutters like a tiny flag of resistance against the tide of funk. You salute it. The night deepens, and the city holds its breath. You're still walking through layers of old decisions, each smell a fossil from an earlier hour. It's exhausting, overwhelming, and kind. Of poetic, like Paris itself, really. Your nose has given up. It's staging a quiet protest somewhere behind your eyes, curled into a ball and mumbling about betrayal. But you press on, because now you're entering the war zone of the senses, the class divide by way of cologne. Welcome to the perfume wars, where aristocrats declare nasal dominance and peasants just survive. Let's begin with a whiff of irony. The richer you were in 18th century Paris, the more you stank, just in fancier packaging. Baths were out of fashion among the elite. Too risky, they thought. Water opened the pores, and bad air, the miasma, mon Dieu, could sneak in and kill you. So instead, the upper crust opted for layers of lace, powdered wigs, and enough perfume to make a lavender field go into shock. You pass a noble couple stepping out of a carriage. The man smells like rose water and clove, the woman like ambergris and crushed regret. Their clothes are immaculate, their hygiene theoretical. Under the layers of brocade and feathers, their bodies are hosting a Renaissance fair of bacteria. But they glide like swans, nose held high, convinced that florals beat fermentation. One mainstream fact: the perfume industry exploded in France during the 18th century, centered in Grasse. What began as a leather-glove de-stinker industry turned into a full-blown olfactory arms race. Scents were designed not just to mask odor, but to obliterate it. The stronger the smell, the wealthier you must be. If your entrance didn't precede you by a cloud of citrus and musk, were you even landed gentry? Meanwhile, you pass a pair of washerwomen arguing over a crate of lye soap. Their scent is honest. Sweat, sun, and soap so harsh it could remove paint. One scratches her scalp and a small bug flings itself off her bonnet in search of better real estate. Hygiene for the lower classes wasn't about luxury, it was triage. Peasants did bathe occasionally, usually in rivers or public baths, but soap was expensive and water access limited. You cleaned the essentials when you could and hoped the wind was in your favor. It wasn't shameful to smell. It was normal, expected. And yet, there was pride in being cleaner than the next guy. Historians still argue whether the elite truly believed they smelled better or if they simply refused to acknowledge their own contributions to the city's stink. It was cognitive dissonance in powdered form. One noblewoman famously said, "A lady is never unclean, only unfortunate." She later died of lice-induced fever. Unfortunate indeed. You turn down a passageway and stumble upon a perfume shop still lit from within. Through the window you spot rows of glass vials, some clear as crystal, others stained amber or deep green. The perfumer inside is swabbing something onto a test strip and waving it under a nobleman's nose. The man sniffs, frowns, and mutters, "Too subtle." The perfumer nods gravely and reaches for a vial labeled simply, "No." 13. You feel sorry for both of them. Here's a fringe tidbit. Many perfumes used base notes derived from animal glands. Musk from deer. Civet from a cat-like creature's butt glands. Ambergris from whale intestines. The fanciest scents were distilled essence of nature's weirdest leftovers, and yet they were considered refined. A whiff of decomposing whale. Barf meant you had arrived. Meanwhile, you walk past a shoemaker who wipes his brow with a rag blackened by years of sweat and glue. He doesn't notice. His world smells like leather, soot, and ambition. He offers you a nod. You nod back, grateful for his honesty. You enter a church to escape for a moment. Incense curls in lazy spirals from brass holders. The scent is thick, sacred, and slightly moldy. Wooden pews release their own musk, dust, candle wax, and the tears of sinners. It's oddly soothing. You sit down. A woman next to you fans herself with a lace fan dabbed in orange blossom. She notices you, sniffs subtly, and shifts 1 inch away. You sigh. By now, your senses are fatigued. Every inhale is an adventure. You can no longer tell whether a scent is from someone's body, clothes, food, or pet, probably all of the above. And yet, you're acclimating, like a frog in soup, a very aromatic soup. You exit the church and catch a breeze from a nearby garden. It carries jasmine, real jasmine, a moment of purity in the sensory battlefield. You close your eyes. But then a nearby pig squeals and interrupts the moment with the smell of wet hay and something vaguely sour. There's another layer to this war. Class-based scent policing. Nobles carried pomanders, decorated balls filled with herbs, to sniff when the streets got too human. Some even wore rings that opened to release perfume, like Bond villains but more floral. Peasants, meanwhile, got scolded for bringing odor into polite spaces, as if their bodies didn't work the same way. You pass a pastry shop closing for the night. The sweet scent of almond tarts and burnt sugar wafts out. It's a trap. Just behind the shop, where the garbage is dumped, the air turns again. Now, it's spoiled cream and rodent. You gag slightly and push onward. At a fountain, a young man leans down to splash water on his face. His shirt is threadbare. His skin shines with effort. But he smells like effort too, like he's done his best with what little he has. And there's something noble in that. You step back and catch your own reflection in a puddle. You're dusty, sweaty, and you're pretty sure you smell like roasted onion with a dash of regret. But you also realize something else. In this world, smelling like reality is the ultimate act of rebellion. Because no matter how many layers of rose and musk the wealthy pile on, the city knows. The nose knows. And in the end, no one escapes the stink. You're still reeling from the olfactory aristocracy when your path winds down toward the Seine, Paris's shimmering, sloshing, semi-liquid backbone. The breeze off the water carries a coolness that should feel refreshing. It does not. Because this particular stretch of river is a backstage area for one of the more questionable hygiene routines of the century, laundry day. Specifically, laundry in a river downstream from multiple slaughterhouses, upstream from a tannery, and occasionally featuring a dead animal cameo. That's where you're headed now. The sound reaches you first, wet slapping, rhythmic and desperate. Then the smell, a cocktail of wet wool, fermented soap, and whatever the river decided to share that morning. A row of washerwomen stands knee-deep. In the water, muscular arms swinging garments over planks. They beat them like they owe money. Shirts, stockings, undergarments, flung, smacked, dunked, and wrung until they surrender. One woman spots you and nods. You nod back, then step carefully around a foamy puddle that smells like sadness and duck fat. You assume it came from someone's undergarments. You don't ask. Historians still argue whether laundering in the Seine actually got anything clean or simply redistributed the dirt into a more pleasing shape. But in a city where soap was a luxury and clean water a myth, the visual of white linen drying in the sun counted for more than actual sterility. One quirky detail: some laundry barges had heated tubs, not because it cleaned better, but because hot water helped loosen the bloodstains out of servants' collars before they went back to pretending they didn't exist. It was a class act, literally. You kneel near the water's edge and dip a hand in. It's icy cold, even in summer. A chill travels up your spine, possibly regret. You imagine washing your only shirt here. It clings to your arms, smells faintly of mildew and desperation, and as you wring it out, a small fish flops out and glares at you. You return it to the water. Fair enough. A boy nearby is scrubbing something that might have once been white. He uses a brush so rough it squeals with every stroke. His knuckles are raw, red. He hums. He's 10. You decide not to ask about the rest of his life. The river wasn't just for laundry. It was multi-purpose. People drank from it, swam in it, dumped waste into it, and sometimes into each other. It was baptism and burial ground, water cooler and cesspool. You pass a woman holding a wooden paddle and an apron stiff with soap crust. She smells better than most. Not good, but better. There's a hint of chamomile clinging to her sleeves. You don't know if it's perfume or if she just fell into a tea shipment earlier. Either way, it's comforting. The Seine has moods, and today it's in a snippy one. The breeze shifts again, and suddenly you're choking on something fishy, metallic, and uninvited. Maybe a broken wine cask leaked upstream. Maybe a butcher decided gravity was the best disposal method. Maybe the river gods are just messing with you. You move away from the shore, but the river doesn't release you. Its smell clings to your shoes, your shirt, your very aura. You're marked now, a member of the great unwashed who dared challenge. Paris's most passive-aggressive body of water. You find a small patch of grass, shockingly green, near a stone bench. A woman lays out damp linens like flags of surrender. You join her, carefully removing your shirt and flapping it half-heartedly in the wind. A passing man stares. You stare back. Your shirt is your business. You notice now how everyone has a rhythm. Wash, beat, rinse, wrangle, hang. It's almost meditative if you ignore the cold, the cramps, and the river's existential revenge. It's not glamorous, but it's a ritual. And in a world with little control, it's something. Cleanish clothes mean dignity, even if they reek again by evening. A man selling soap from a cart rolls by. His wares are lumpy, grayish, and smell like old garlic. You buy one out of curiosity. He winks and says, 3 uses: laundry, dishes, and funerals. You laugh. You're not sure if he's joking. A gentle rain begins, soft and misty. You panic. Wet laundry after hours of drying is a tragedy here. Everyone scrambles, grabbing sheets, stuffing shirts into baskets. You follow suit, clinging to your own damp trophy of survival. The soap bar begins to melt in your hand. You pocket what's left. Historians still debate whether the act of public laundering helped build social bonds or just provided a space for passive-aggressive gossip. Either way, the river was witness to all of it. Love confessions, murder alibis, and the occasional soup recipe, pounded out over wet drawers and shouted through steam. You return your shirt to your back. It's cleaner now, not by modern standards, but by 18th century ones. It doesn't make your eyes water anymore, and that's a win. You smell vaguely like soap and wet rock, like everyone else. As you walk away from the Seine, the city reclaims you. The smells return in layers, like angry cake frosting. But now, you're armored. You've participated. You've earned a nose callus and a new appreciation for what it means to be washed. And that soap bar in your pocket? That's going in your historical trophy case.
You climb back into the twisting arteries of Paris with a faint hope that maybe, just maybe, the laundry district was the low point. It was not, because now you're heading straight into the stomach of the beast street food stalls and meat. Vendors packed elbow to in a market where hygiene is a distant rumor. If the city has a digestive tract, this is the intestine. Welcome to dinner service 18th century style. The first scent that hits you is impossible. It's sweet, smoky, and meaty, but there's a sour aftershock like something pickled inside. A boot. You follow your nose to a cart where a hunched man is stirring a massive pot. The contents bubble ominously. You ask what it is? He smiles and says, whatever didn't sell. He's not joking. Street cuisine in Paris was about survival, not pleasure. Vendors scavenged, repurposed, and cooked fast. Meat was minced to disguise questionable origins. Bread was stale but toasted. Cheese was somewhere between aged and medically concerning. And people ate it all because they had to. You pass a boy selling roasted chestnuts. They smell divine, smoky, earthy, comforting. You reach for one and accidentally brush against a hanging string of sausages, only to realize they're not sausages. They're desiccated rat skins, stretched and drying like leather bookmarks. The boy shrugs. Tanner's trade, says. Sure, let's go with that. Historians still argue whether actual rats were part of the lower class diet. Officially, no. But when meat was scarce and butchers weren't picky, it's entirely plausible some dishes squeaked before they sizzled. Rats were everywhere nibbling bread, nesting in hay, dying dramatically behind cheese stalls. If one fell into your stew, bonus protein, a truly fringe detail, some Parisian apothecaries sold powdered mouse skulls as a remedy for bedwetting, which says less about rats and more about how far people would go when logic abandoned them. The smell of the market is a concert of contradictions, sweet and rancid, frying dough and decaying offal. You spot a fishmonger fanning flies away from a pile of gutted carp. Looks bored, like someone who's lost every argument with fate. Of the fish makes a squishy noise. You pretend it's the wind. Next door, a butcher sharpens a cleaver the size of your arm. He's slicing something that may have started life as a cow, a dog, or an unlucky goat. The meat steams in the cool air, mingling with the scent of blood and sawdust. Small dog sniffs near the drain and is promptly shooed away. You're not sure if the butcher's protecting the meat or the dog. A woman sells soup from a dented cauldron. You peek in and see ... textures. Chunks of something gelatinous float beside limp vegetables and what might be a bird's foot. Take a polite step back. She offers a spoon. You decline, lying about just having eaten. She shrugs and serves a bowl to a passing man, who slurps it down without blinking. You admire his courage or his sinus damage. Paris's food scene wasn't all horror, of course. Bakeries still turned out crusty loaves. Some taverns served stew that didn't cause hallucinations. But the open-air stalls were more roulette. Wheel than restaurant. If it smelled vaguely edible, it was dinner. You watch a child eat a skewer of roasted mystery meat with both hands. He grins, teeth full of grease. His sister drinks something from a mug that steams slightly and smells like mold regret. They laugh, and you suddenly understand when everything smells this chaotic. Flavor becomes a gamble and a game. You walk deeper into the maze of stalls. Someone roasts onions over coal. Another vendor pours hot cider laced with spices. Smell is heavenly until you realize the same hands stirring the cider also just gutted a duck without washing. Bon appétit. A cluster of men crouch around a small fire roasting what appear to be pigeon wings. One offers you a seat. You decline, remembering that time a pigeon exploded near a bakery earlier. You still haven't emotionally recovered. You pass a cheese cart, and the odor wall hits you like a philosophical crisis. It's earthy, sulfurous, and oddly buttery. A wheel of brie is so runny it appears to be trying to escape. Another wedge of blue-veined something hisses softly when sliced. The vendor offers you a bite from the heart of the wheel. You tell him your heart's fine. Thanks, quirky fact. Cheese in 18th century Paris wasn't refrigerated, obviously. It was alive. It's not in the poetic wind, the literal, occasionally squirming way. Mites were part of the charm. You were expected to befriend your food before consuming it. As the sun dips low, the market begins to wind down. Scraps are swept into gutters, carts are wheeled away, and the air begins to thicken with the smell of leftovers fermenting in the warmth of the day. Rats return to reclaim their turf. See one leap into a crate and emerge with half a roll. Efficient. Historians note that the streets often served as both dining room and garbage bin. Food waste was a constant feature of the city's landscape. Some of it got scavenged, some of it got cooked again, some of it just waited for rain. You take one last walk past a pastry vendor. He's closing up, wiping his hands on an apron that looks like it's seen multiple centuries. He offers you a tart apple, maybe pear. You bite. It's shockingly good. It's warm, flaky, sweet. For a brief moment, you forget where you are, and then the wind shifts, and a nearby pile of oyster shells reminds you. The tart leaves a buttery film on your tongue, a tiny triumph in a battlefield of mold. But you don't have long to savor it, because now you're entering the dressing room of 18th century Paris. A place where cleanliness plays dress-up and body odor puts on a powdered wig. That's where two are off to experience the glamorous world of wigs, hair powder, and the quiet horror of scalp rot. Your first stop is a narrow alley behind a perfumer's shop. It's early evening, and men are queuing for their weekly appointment. With the neighborhood perruquier, smell hits before you even see him. Imagine flour mixed with sweat, mingled with something like talcum in yesterday's stew. The powder rice-based, sometimes starch. Sometimes flour is clinging to every surface. Windowsills, coat collars, stray pigeons. You edge closer and catch a glimpse of the process. A man sits stiffly as the wigmaster dabs powder from a cloth, bag onto his head, then brushes it through a wig the color of crushed bone. His real hair is slicked back, greased into submission with a concoction of wax, bare fat, and regret. The wig sits like a smug little hat atop all this effort, and the final product? Fashionable, absolutely. Fragrant? Depends on your definition of acceptable. Mainstream historical fact? In the 1700s, wigs weren't just a style, they were social currency. A big, white, heavily powdered wig announced status, taste, and maybe a touch of syphilis, since wigs were also used to cover hair loss from disease. The higher the hair, the closer to, well, getting caught in a chandelier. Historians still argue whether people genuinely liked the smell of hair powder or just tolerated it because everyone else was doing it. It didn't mask everything. In fact, it sometimes added a new note to the existing funk, like spritzing perfume over a compost pile and calling it spring. You pass a young man proudly adjusting his queue, the braided tail of his wig swinging like a curtain tassel, like nutmeg and nervousness. His companion fluffs her own powdered dome, which is decorated with a tiny paper dove perched among curls. It's beautiful. It also has lice. That's your fringe detail for this stroll. Lice were epidemic in wigs. Powder didn't kill them, just annoyed them long enough to crawl somewhere else, like your eyebrows. Some people sprinkled their wigs with mercury dust in a desperate bid to get rid of the pests. Effective? Occasionally? Deadly? So occasionally you duck into a salon hoping to escape the chill, find yourself in a room filled with wigs on stands like a hair museum curated by a mad scientist. A young apprentice is dusting each with a big brush and a look of quiet despair. One wig sports tiny curls dyed pink. Another has faux pearls embedded along the crown. One smells strongly of mold. That's another thing about hair fashion in this era. There were no dry cleaners. If a wig got to rank, it was either repowdered into submission or burned in shame. Wealthy folks had multiple wigs on rotation. The less fortunate had one, which aged visibly with each passing season. By year 2, it looked like a taxidermied raccoon that had seen things. You catch sight of a powder closet, a small chamber where the powdering happened to contain the mess. It's a claustrophobic cloud of dust, broken only by coughs and the occasional mondieu. The floor is slick with paste and foot powder, and the air tastes like bakery fumes mixed with armpit. You last 3 seconds before stumbling out, gasping out in the street. A breeze sends a flurry of powder into the night, swirling past chimney smoke and the cries of a distant fruit vendor. Your eyes itch. You're not alone. Everyone blinks and sniffs, but no one comments. That's just how air works here now. You pass a laundress, hanging freshly washed. Neck ruffles cravats that reek faintly of vinegar and starch. She waves at you with a clothespin in her mouth. Behind her, a line of wigs hangs to dry on a rope, gently swaying like ghostly gourds. You tell yourself it's the wind. Another stop brings you to a townhouse, where a lady is being prepared for a soiree. You can see the silhouettes through gauzy curtains to maids, one standing on a stool to reach the top of the lady's towering hairstyle. They're powdering, teasing, pinning. The wig is so tall it might have weather patterns. A curl droops. The maid curses softly. Quirky detail. Now, some hairstyles were so elaborate that women had to sleep sitting up using special wire frames to protect the structure. Others were lacquered with animal glue to hold shape, which often led to mold growing inside the wig, if not properly aired. You heard that right. Moldy hair hats were a thing. A carriage rolls past, its driver wearing a powdered wig of his own. The horses smell better than he does. You wonder how many hours went into his look today, how many layers of powder, how many drops of essence of rosemary or clove oil, all of it to pretend the body beneath wasn't constantly at war with itself. Hair powder had become a kind of olfactory social armor. You weren't expected to be clean. You were expected to smell like you tried. A hint of lavender meant you had standards. A whiff of cinnamon suggested courtly leanings. Too much musk, though. That reeked of desperation. Or worse. Middle class. You wander past a shop selling sachets of dried herbs to tuck inside wigs. Keeps moths away, the vendor says brightly. And memory demons. You don't ask about that last part. You just buy one because your nose deserves a win. As the night deepens, the air grows heavy. The scent of wigs, sweat, and social anxiety lingers like a cocktail no one ordered. You sit on a step beside a man who's clearly removed his wig. For the day, his real hair is damp, matted, free. He sighs, and so do you. In the darkness, without the powder and pretense, everyone smells the same. You're getting the hang of this now, the art of dodging puddles without asking what they're made of. Of breathing just enough to live, but not enough to fully process the air. But just when you think you've graduated from the Academy of Parisian filth, you look up and realize you've been walking under the most dangerous bathroom in the city, the upstairs window. You've wandered into mansion territory, the kind of towering homes where each floor holds a different version of reality, stacked like a social lasagna. The rich live at the top, their servants somewhere in the middle. And you're down here in the splash zone. Above you, windows creak open, curtains flutter. Cued briefly, stupidly, to admire the view. Then a thud, a splash, a bloom of liquid beside you, sinister and steaming. That wasn't rain. That was a chamber pot. You leap sideways like a startled cat, heart pounding. The night is silent except for the distant clatter of hooves and your slowly returning dignity. Upstairs window clicks shut. No apology. No shame. Just gravity, hard at work, mainstream fact. In 18th century Paris, most private homes lacked indoor plumbing. Even among the elite, the bathroom was a movable concept. There were chamber pots porcelain, if you had money. Wood or pewter, if you didn't. These were emptied out windows into the street, ideally after a warning cry of Gardet's low. But let's be honest, many just whispered it, or skipped it entirely. Historians still argue whether this habit was driven more by laziness or by architecture. Most staircases were narrow, twisting things. Carrying a full chamber pot down them, risky business. Easier to just hurl the problem into the street and let nature handle it, or more accurately, let the poor handle it. You pass a row of fine houses. The air here is deceptively fragrant cologne. Crushed herbs, the faint scent of waxed wood. But under it all, there's a murmur of urine, rot, and cooked fat. It's like a layered dessert of denial. A footman rushes by, carrying a sloshing pail with a rag draped over it. He nods as he passes. You nod back, knowing he's the one who has to scrub the parquet floors where guests in powdered wigs once peed. During parties, yes, that happened. Communal pots at salons. Sometimes hidden behind curtains, sometimes just not. One quirky bit of etiquette. At high society dinners, it wasn't uncommon for guests to use a pot mid-conversation, tucked discreetly. Beneath the tablecloth, a servant would collect it after. Cleanliness didn't matter as long as appearances were preserved. The stench, considered part of the evening's earthiness. You duck into a side alley to avoid another close call. This one is narrower, quieter, until you spot the telltale glisten along the base of the wall. Someone's been using this as their personal latrine, recently and often. You look up and spot a small decorative balcony. A man leans on it, smoking. He looks at you, looks down, then gives you a half-hearted wave. You wave back. You've bonded over shared danger. The myth of clean, noble spaces falls apart once you're this close. Rich homes had tapestries, velvet, curtains, and chandeliers, but also lice, chamber pots, and buckets full of slop. Marble countertops couldn't mask the fact that there were rats in the pantry and sour milk in the cellar. You pass a delivery boy dragging a handcart of coal. His boots squelch slightly, and you realize he's dragging the cart through a trail of yesterday's mistakes. A cabbage leaf clings to his heel. He doesn't notice. Nearby, a grand house has an open window with music spilling out. Laughter. The tinkle of harpsichord. A woman's voice trills something about moonlight. You imagine her, powdered and perfect. Not 20 feet above the same gutter where a dead rat lounges on its side like it's posing for a painting. Duality, you suppose. You move under an overhang and nearly trip over a discarded slipper. It's delicate satin embroidered likely dropped during a post-dinner walk. You pick it up, then think better, and set it down. It smells faintly of rose petals and feet. Quirky detail? It wasn't uncommon for people to urinate in fireplaces when chamber pots weren't available. Why? Because the ashes absorbed the smell. And it was marginally more private than using the stairwell. Fireplace, warmth, ambience, and occasionally a urinal. A coach rumbles past. The driver stinks of pipe smoke and wool, but his boots gleam. You wonder how he manages to stay so pristine. Maybe he levitates. You pass a building where a maid is dumping water out a second-story window, actual water this time, used for scrubbing. Floors, it hits the stones below with a slap, mixing into the filth already there. The scent is lemon-scented soap meeting weak cold beer, refreshing in a twisted way. The reality of Parisian mansions isn't that they were cleaner, they just disguised their filth with polish and perfume. Beneath the marble and mirrors was the same biology, same gravity, the same need to eliminate, and the same lack of a functioning sewer system. Historians debate whether the nobles even noticed. When you're used to being cleaned up after, you forget what mess looks like or smells like. But the servants knew, the dogs knew, the rats absolutely knew. You stop beneath a row of windows, wary. A faint trickle begins from one corner. You step back, instinctively, and watch as a man empties a small pot into the drain, careful not to splash his own boots. He sees you, nods solemnly, then disappears inside, courteous, disgusting. Classic Paris, as you walk on. You realize that surviving the streets isn't just about where you step, it's about what you hear. The creak of a window. The gurgle of a pot. The splash that comes half a second too late. This city is a symphony, and you're learning the rhythm. Keep your eyes up. But not too far up. You leave the mansion district behind with only a mild case of chamber pot PTSD and make your way towards something more primal. The heartbeat of Parisian consumption, commerce, and carnage. That's right, it's market day. And you've just walked into the largest and most aromatic arena of them all. Les HLLES. Welcome to the belly of Paris, the original food court, the olfactory Olympics. You're greeted by a sensory ambush, raw meat, ripe cheese, wet feathers, and an undercurrent of something fishy that may or may not be fish. The smell is so thick, it feels like a fabric pressing against your face. You're not sure whether to breathe or chew. Les Halles in the 18th century wasn't just a marketplace. Was the marketplace a sprawl of covered stalls, open carts, livestock, pens, fish slabs, and cheese towers, all densely packed into a square kilometer of ambition and bacteria. If you needed it, they had it. If they had it, it smelled. Your first encounter is with the meat parade. Carcasses hang from hooks like grotesque puppets. Pigs, calves, goats all, in various states of flay and display. The butcher wipes his hands. On his apron, then gestures with a cleaver. Fresh today, he grunts, pointing at a cow's head whose tongue is still lolling. You nod slowly and move on. Mainstream fact. Les Halles was Paris's central food hub since the 12th century, and by the 1700s, it had grown into a monstrous organism. Thousands of vendors shouted, chopped, fried, smoked, and sold their wares from dawn till dusk. Some slept in the stalls, others never left at all. Historians still argue whether this chaos was efficient or just tolerated. Goods flowed, money changed hands, people got fed. But the waste was legendary. Blood pooled in gutters, fish scales coated the stones, and meat trimmings piled up like snowbanks. Sanitation? Aspirational? A fringe detail? The butchers of Les Halles had their own guild and rituals, including a rite where apprentices had to drink wine mixed with animal blood to be officially accepted. Nothing says job commitment like a meaty merlot. You edge past a pen of live poultry, the air twitching with feathers and ammonia. Chickens squawk, ducks mutter, and one goose gives you the side eye like it's sizing you up for revenge. Nearby, a man is plucking feathers with a rhythm that suggests he could do this in his sleep hand. Maybe is. Then comes the cheese corridor. A lesser soul might cry. You brace yourself? The air curdles, aggressive and oddly buttery. Wheels of brie ooze like wounded soldiers. Chunks of Roquefort stand defiantly green. A vendor slices a wedge of something that squeaks audibly and says, "Smell that. That's maturity." You nod while your eyes water. Quirky detail. French. Cheese wasn't just aged. It was often cultivated with bacteria and mold from specific caves, wooden boards, or even the vendor's own hands. Yes, hands. Some claim the microbial balance of their skin added character. No, you believe it. You regret believing it. You pivot to a bakery stand for comfort. The bread smells heavenly crusty, warm, with hints of flour and sanity. But just as you reach for a sample, a rat dashes across the countertop, snatches a crumb, vanishes into a crack in the wall. The baker sighs. "That one's called Jacques," he mutters, and resumes slicing. The juxtaposition here is surreal. Beauty and rot, delight and dread all crammed into one space like ingredients in an experimental stew. A stall of candied fruits glows in jewel tones beside a pile of fish guts baking in the sun. A florally dressed woman samples oysters as a man hoses blood off a hook behind her. You pass a spice vendor whose stand smells like escape. Cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, peppercorns. It's dizzying. You want to live there? But 2 stalls over, someone is boiling bones, and the broth smells like a haunted boot. Paris gives, and Paris takes away. Rain begins to fall, soft and sibilant. It taps the roof of the covered stalls, turning dust into slurry. The blood mixes into the runoff. Flies scatter. Momentarily defeated, a dog drinks from a puddle and looks vaguely pleased. You step carefully, knowing any slip could be both a physical and moral disaster. A nearby vendor sells soup from a kettle the size of a bathtub. You're pure in lentils, you think, and possibly onions. Maybe lamb, maybe not. You're handed a bowl. You sip. It's hot, salty, oddly comforting. Then you crunch something unexpected. You choose not to investigate further. It's market day. You've earned a mystery. Historians note that Les Halles wasn't just a place to buy food, it was a place to be food adjacent. Social life, business deals, scandals, flirtations, duels, they all happened among the cabbages, you witness. 2 vendors arguing over stall space with the intensity of a Shakespearean betrayal. A third man reveries with a fish in each hand. The rain picks up, and vendors scramble to cover goods. Canvas sheets flap, carts are wheeled back under awnings. The smell intensifies, not cleaner, just wetter, like the difference between burnt toast and burnt toast in a steam room. You find brief shelter under a stall that sells dried fruits and nuts. The air here is calm, sweet, almost bearable. You close your eyes, you breathe. Then someone behind you drops a basket of tripe, and the dream ends. As the market begins to close, the cleanup or lack thereof begins. Discarded produce, bones. Feathers and paper mix into the streets. Scavengers move in. Dogs, cats, children, old women with baskets. Nothing goes entirely to waste. Paris is a city that believes in leftovers. You step away from Les Halles, your boots now part meat, part bread, part cheese. The air behind you is still churning with life. Ahead, more filth awaits. But for now, you've survived the parade, and somehow you're hungry again? You stagger away from Les Halles, your stomach confused, your boots resigned. The sky is turning the color of old parchment, and the clouds overhead are beginning to swell with the kind of slow, malicious rain Paris does best. Not a refreshing downpour. No, this is a drizzle designed to activate the city's secrets, the microbial equivalent of someone reheating old fish in a microwave. Welcome to the city's moist season. You hear the first drop before you feel it a soft plock, as a raindrop strikes a pile of something best left unnamed. You look up. It's coming. Not a storm. A slow, creeping drizzle. The kind that seeps into everything: your hair, your shoes, your mood, and more importantly, the streets. The cobblestones darken, stains reawaken. Dried puddles from earlier pot dumpings swell into small lagoons. The perfume of Paris, already complex, becomes a crescendo of wet wool, rotting starch, and vaguely boiled things. Rain in this city isn't cleansing, it's communicative. It brings the past to the surface. Every drop is a time traveler. You press into an awning for shelter, only to find it's been leaking since Louis XIV. Water drips onto your neck. You move again. Another drop. This time it lands directly into your left shoe. Of course it does. Historians still argue whether the wet seasons in Paris made public health worse or just differently bad. On one hand, rain could help flush the streets. On the other, it turned every neglected crevice into a portable plague nursery. The puddles weren't just water, they were encyclopedias of organic life. Quirky fact: Paris was once nicknamed La Ville Mouée, the damp city, by foreign diplomats who complained that their boots never dried. One ambassador wrote, "Home that the city smelled as though God himself had forgotten to mop it." You slosh forward. The air is now wet enough to drink. You don't, obviously, unless you want to experience 18th century intestinal roulette. But you do breathe. And now that breath carries notes of manure, fireplace smoke, and a subtle bouquet of recently washed underpants that didn't fully dry. You pass a man spreading ash on the steps of his shop. Ash, you realize, absorbs water and smells, or at least it tries. His expression says he's not convinced either.
Advice.
Beside him, a bucket overflows gently, releasing a cascade of brownish liquid down the gutter. It joins a puddle that already contains what looks like half a turnip and one boot. Street sweepers, called belayers, do their best. You spot one dragging a ragged broom through the sludge, pushing water, dung, food scraps, and possibly small philosophical questions toward the center of the road. His boots are wrapped in cloth. His nose, you assume, has gone on vacation. Mainstream fact: 18th century Paris had no modern drainage system. Rainwater was funneled down inclined streets into open channels where it was supposed to flow toward the Seine. In reality, it often pooled in low spots or backed up due to debris, creating seasonal swamps that smelled like a goat's memory. Of trauma, you skirt a particularly aggressive puddle. It hisses. You don't ask. Ahead, two children are floating a toy boat made from a cracked cheese wheel rind. They laugh as it capsizes dramatically in what might be a mix of gravy and laundry runoff. Then comes the real betrayal. Your shoe squelches, not just once, but twice. It's inside now. You're soaked to the sock, whatever that puddle was made of. It has claimed you as kin. You find a vendor selling warm chestnuts under a canopy that barely qualifies as shelter. The smell is comforting: smoke, sugar, a faint suggestion of something uncorrupted. You buy a handful. He hands them over wrapped in a paper cone that instantly becomes mush in your hands. You eat quickly, it helps. Quirky note, some Parisians used bread crusts as makeshift napkins during wet weather. It's not for hands for shoes. The crust would soak up the wet grime and then be tossed, or sometimes reused. You look at your last chestnut, then at your shoe, and quickly change your mind. The rain keeps falling. Not hard, just enough. Just enough to make everything smell more. The city's filth is blooming. Mold in corners, grease on stone, rot behind carts. It's a living olfactory museum, and every drop of rain is a spotlight on some long-suffering exhibit. You pass a collapsed cart that once sold onions. They're now scattered in a wet heap, sprouting tiny green shoots as if trying to escape. A man sits beside them, eating one raw as rain slides down his hat and into his collar. He nods at you. Paris solidarity. Another man trudges by, carrying a dead chicken like a bouquet. He's barefoot. You try not to think about what his feet are touching. You fail. You duck under a church portico and watch as a woman haggles over a length of cloth while standing ankle-deep in water that looks like soup broth. Her umbrella is made of oilskin. Her spirit is unbroken. You salute her with a nod she doesn't see. Historians note that Parisians developed a kind of gait during the rainy seasona, half-skip, half-slide used to avoid the worst puddles while minimizing splash damage.
You tried.
You nearly fall into a barrel of pickled something. Eventually, the rain begins to let up. The drizzle fades to mist. The clouds lift slightly, and the city exhales. But the damage is done. The streets are slick with memory. The walls drip stories. The smell-enhanced, awakened, emboldened lingers. You continue walking, your feet squish. Your coat smells faintly of dog, and for the first time, you realize this is the smell of Paris. The mist curls behind you like an old friend you didn't invite, dragging the city's soaked memories. Along as you step into one of the quieter back alleys near the old Hotel d'A hospital. It's darker here, less lantern light, fewer market carts, and no competing shouts of hot soup or fresh blood sausage. Just the slow, steady drip from the rooftops and the faint hum of decay. You pause at a cracked wooden sign swinging over a stone arch. It reads Maison des Enfants Strauss, the home for abandoned children. A warm welcome, it is not. The smell here is different, not as aggressive, but deeper. A kind of damp mildew mingled with sour milk and overcooked porridge. Behind it, something you recognize immediately. Sickness. Paris didn't just reek of filth. It reeked of mortality, of unwashed wounds and borrowed time. And if your nose was sharp enough, it could sniff out what doctors couldn't yet name. Mainstream fact, long before germ theory. Disease in the 18th century was blamed on miasma, bad air. Well, not a terrible guess, honestly, considering what the air was carrying. People believed smells could make you sick, that death crept in through your nostrils. And walking through this district, you start to get it. The scent tapestry tightens. There's human sweat, of course always present, but now it's tinged with fear. Out. You pass an apothecary shop with dried herbs strung like garlic above the doorway. The interior reeks of vinegar and camphor, a desperate blend meant to drive away the invisible. Historians still argue whether the miasma theory delayed medical advancement or helped save lives by keeping people away from contaminated zones. In a strange twist, the paranoia around smell occasionally did lead to less exposure. People avoided bad air districts. Physicians stuffed their masks with potpourri. Windows were kept open. It's not because it helped, but because it seemed. 2. You step into a narrow passage where the walls seem to lean in. A woman in a shawl coughs into her hand, then waves you past. You nod and keep walking. The scent thickens again, now it's something iron-like. You realize you're near a leech seller's cart. Yes, that was a thing. A man with a small crate opens it to reveal dozens of wriggling black forms swimming in a dish of cloudy water. He beckons with a grin. You pass? Quirky detail? Leeches were believed to cure everything from fevers to hysteria to unfortunate moods. They weren't just for doctors, it's anyone. With a few coins, could buy a small vial of leeches and apply them like sentient band-aids. That's one way to get the blood flowing. Further down, you come upon the Hotel Gia itself, the city's main hospital and one of its oldest. It's a towering structure filled with beds, bodies, and bacteria. You can't go inside. The stench keeps you out, rolls from the doorway in waves. Feces, sweat, decay, poultices, and that one hard-to-place smell of dying linen. The kind of smell you never forget. Patients inside often shared beds, not just rooms, beds. 2, sometimes 3, to a mattress, often with different ailments. Dysentery next to measles, fever beside frostbite. It was less triage and more lottery. You didn't arrive sick, you likely left that way. You hear a priest inside reciting last rites. You hear a scream, then silence. The smell continues, indifferent. Down the street, a plague house still boarded up from decades ago remains untouched. The wood has blackened. The door is nailed shut. But even through the cracks, you smell it dust, smoke, and old secrets. Child runs past and spits at the door for luck. One peculiar belief at the time is that carrying certain smells could protect you from other worse ones. People tied oranges stuffed with cloves around their necks, held vinegar-soaked rags to their noses, carried small vials of perfume or turpentine as makeshift gas masks. It wasn't medical, but it was ritual. You stop to watch a man in a dark cloak sweeping ashes across his doorstep. Keeps the fever away, he mutters. You're not sure if he means physically, spiritually, or olfactorily. All three, maybe. Another alley yields a surprise. A candle maker. The air here is thick with tallow-rendered animal fat used for lighting. It smells fatty, smoky, faintly sweet. Then you see the source, a vat bubbling with something pale and viscous. A hand stirs it slowly with a wooden stick. Nearby, molds hang on a rope, drying into misshapen tapers. You consider buying one, then remember, candles made from fat absorb odors. You don't need a stink sponge in your cycle. The rain begins again, just enough to reignite the smell cycle. Your nostrils detect mildew, overripe stone fruit, and something chemically sharp, possibly spirits spilled from an infirmary window, or possibly something worse. A woman sells bundles of lavender from under a tarp. You buy one, to hold it to your face and remember that life isn't only rot, that there are flowers still, even here. Even now, historians love to point out how intertwined scent and medicine were. Smell wasn't a symptom, it was. Diagnosis? A sour breath? Bad digestion? The scent of almonds? Poisoning. Sweetness in a wound? Infection? Doctors trained their noses like modern musicians tune a piano. You wonder if you've learned something similar tonight. You walk past a beggar missing several teeth. He smiles and says you smell like the rain. You thank him, unsure if it's a compliment. He laughs. So do you, and as you turn the corner and leave the hospital ward behind, something strikes you. It's not just that Paris smelled bad, it's that Paris smelled like life complicated, confusing, tender, and terrible. And that's a scent that never fully washes off. You come to the edge of the city, or at least the edge of reality, because now it's time to visit the one place in France where excess meets denial with the decorum of embroidered drapes and crustless pastries. Versailles? Yes, that Versailles. The golden lung of the Ancien regime. And surprise, it smells like wealth wilting roses. And human tragedy lightly dusted with talc. You cross through gilded gates that look like they were made to keep out consequences. Inside, the palace opens, up like a joculum's, arches, silk tapestries, mirrored halls, and under it all, the unmistakable scent of armpits dressed in lavender and fear. 'Cause even royalty, with all their crystal and pomp, couldn't outrun the 18th century's one great equalizer. The Funk. Versailles didn't have plumbing in any real sense. What it had were creative delusions. Chamber pots were everywhere, behind screens, under chairs, hidden in ornate cabinets, so elaborate they had names and personalities. The aristocracy did not wait for privacy. They performed their bodily needs like passive-aggressive theater. Mainstream fact. Versailles was notorious for its lack of bathrooms. At the peak of its population, around 10,000 residents, staff and hangers-on there were maybe a few dozen places for proper relief. The result? People relieved themselves in stairwells, gardens, corridors, and behind tapestries. One ambassador reportedly slipped on human waste during a state visit and broke his dignity in 3 places. Historians still argue whether Louis XIV truly believed Versailles was a symbol of control and cleanliness, or if he just stopped caring after his 3rd intestinal surgery. Either way, his palace smelled like candles, corpses, and anxiety. You enter the Hall of Mirrors, and the scent is oddly bearable, thanks to the open windows, and perhaps divine mercy. You pass a group of courtiers dabbing perfume under their wigs. One is reapplying Glory of the Sun King, a fragrance made from jasmine, musk, and what smells suspiciously like old goat. They reek of powder and ambition. Quirky tidbit: court life had rules for everything, including how and when to apply perfume. A true aristocrat layered scents strategically. One on the wig, one on the cuffs, one on the neck, and one in the shoes. Yes, foot fragrance. Nothing says nobility like perfumed toes. You catch sight of Marie Antoinette's private chamber. It's lovely, it's floral, and behind a velvet curtain, a portable commode, gilded, porcelain-lined, and very much used. The queen's attendants cleaned it with scented herbs and rose water. But still waste is waste, even in Versailles. You step out into the garden and inhale fresh air. Finally, sort of. Because the landscaping, while stunning, hides the same truth. Versailles was designed to be seen, not smelled. The fountains, the manicured hedges, the fragrant orange trees, all attempts to mask the reality that hundreds of people were defecating just off camera. You pass a hedgerow and surprise a valet mid-squat, tips his hat. You pretend this is normal. Here's something you didn't expect: the kitchens. You duck into a lower corridor and find the royal culinary quarters vast, smoky, chaotic. Roasted meats, spiced sauces, boiling sugar. It smells delicious. And then you see the drain. It's a wide trench filled with runoff grease, peels, bones, and the occasional rat skeleton. It smells less delicious. Royal leftovers were fought over by staff. Some were reserved to lower tier guests. Others went to the dogs. Literally. Versailles had royal dogs. They ate better than most Parisians. Back in the halls, you pass a small chapel. Incense lingers in the rafters, clove, frankincense, a hint of mildew. It's comforting, until you notice a stain on the floor near the back pew. That's not candle wax. You keep walking. People often imagine Versailles as pristine, but you're here and you know better now. Beneath the velvet lies urine. Behind the lace, lice. Between the bouquets, someone forgot to clean, and the stink. It's stubborn, regal, immortal. Another oddity. The palace had night stools, essentially fancy toilet chairs with velvet upholstery. They were cleaned by servants, often reluctantly, and sometimes not at all. One nobleman famously refused to use anything that wasn't embroidered. His death from infection was described as unexpected. It was not. You cross into a music room where harpsichord notes drift over the scent of hot wax and powdered wigs. A young man plays. A woman fans herself. Somewhere a body coughs. The palace is alive, but it's not well. You overhear a servant whispering about an outbreak of fever in the East Wing. They're burning herbs and washing linens in vinegar. The nobles pretend it's a new fashion trend. The vinegar scent, they call it. It won't save them. You reach the grand staircase just as a noblewoman descends, flanked by attendants. Her gown rustles like a thunderstorm. She steps carefully. Because one wrong move on these stairs, slick with polish, and occasionally worse can ruin a reputation faster than a duel. As you exit Versailles, the air outside tastes cleaner. Not because it is, but because your nose has been through a royal gauntlet. You've smelled gold, opulence, ego, and denial. And the truth is, for all their silken soap, the royals didn't smell better. Just different, like scented letters in a burning house. You leave Versailles behind, trailing the perfume of powdered hypocrisy, and make your way back toward the city's raw underbelly. Gone are the gilded halls and velvet stools. Now it's cobbles again. Grease, wood smoke. the steam of someone else's dinner, you're heading toward the working quarters. Specifically, the part of town where blood meets apprenticeship, the butcher's district. You find him near a shop with no real name, just a swinging sign that features a very optimistic-looking cow. His apron was white once, maybe. Now it's a tapestry of stains browns, reds, yellows, some shades that don't even have names. This is Antoine, the butcher's son. He's 14. He smells like the inside of a marrow bone. And you're shadowing him for the day. He nods at you without stopping his work. He's currently hoisting a half pig onto a hook. His arms are stronger than they should be. You realize quickly that the smell isn't just coming from the meat, it's from him. His smock is stiff with old fat and congealed blood. His boots are lined with a mystery sauce. And his hair smells faintly of smoked ham and sweat dreams. Mainstream fact. Apprenticeships in trades like butchery started young. Children as young as 10 or 11 were expected to learn the craft, which in this case meant gutting, hauling, slicing, scrubbing, and occasionally dodging angry livestock. There were no rubber gloves, no aprons you tossed in the wash. The same smock day after day. Aging with you, Antoine lifts a cleaver with the ease of someone who does this before breakfast. "Keep your feet out of the blood trough," he mutters. You obey. Then you step sideways into something worse. Doesn't look up. Historians still argue whether meat markets like this were the backbone of urban food supply or just open-air disease casinos. Paris needed its butchers, but they were feared as much as they were respected. The knives, the smells, the sheer amount of blood, it was unsettling and essential. Quirky tidbit: butchers had legal permission to dispose of their waste directly into the street gutters. That meant entrails, bones, and spoiled cuts often slid into public thoroughfares like very unfortunate water features. After a long day, street outside a butcher's shop looked like a scene from a horror-themed slipdash and dash slide. Antoine finishes carving and hands. It's off a bundle of meat to a customer who's holding a waxed cloth. The customer sniffs the bundle, nods and pays. There is no pretense here. Meat smells like meat, and that's how you know it's good, or at least fresh enough to gamble on. You help Antoine sweep the day's remnants into a trough near the back. It smells like death in reheated broth. He tells you they'll send a cart later to haul it off to the glue makers. Till then, it sits and stews. In summer, it bubbles. You notice a black cat watching from the rafters. Antoine nods at it. Nice. The rat's out? You both know it's a lie. Nothing keeps the rats out. But it helps to believe. He gestures to a wooden bench where two smaller boys are sharpening knives. The shavings smell like hot metal and sour fingers. One is humming a song you vaguely recognize as something bawdy about a nun and a stable boy. You decide not to ask. The shop closes for a break. Antoine pulls a hunk of bread from a pocket and offers you half. It tastes like lard and flour. It tastes like work. He leans against the wall and rubs at a spot on his sleeve as if one good swipe will return the smock to its factory settings. It doesn't, quirky fact? Butcher's aprons were never fully cleaned. A clean smock meant you weren't working. Crusted, reeking one meant you were seasoned. Some were so stiff they could stand on their own. One man boasted he could leave his against a wall and it wouldn't fall. A source of pride, or at least identity. You follow Antoine on a delivery run. He shoulders a wrapped calf leg and marches through alleys like a knight with a meaty lance. People nod as he passes. Some step aside. Others sniff. No one questions the smell. You pass a bakery. The scent of bread flirts with your senses. Then Antoine steps in something, and the spell is broken. The smell of blood-soaked leather returns like a slap. Back at the shop, he tosses bones into a barrel-labeled soup. You peek in. It's a macabre treasure chest. Knuckles, marrow, cracked skulls. He sees you looking. Good broth, he says. Boil it long enough and it don't matter where it came from. You nod, and then mentally cancel dinner. The floor is sticky. The walls are stained. The ceiling drips occasionally. Antoine shows you the sawdust bin where they sweep the day's blood. The sawdust smells like pine and despair. It soaks up the mess, but not the memory. A woman comes in, pinching her nose. "Nothing fresh today?" she asks. Antoine smiles and hands her a wrapped packet. She mutters a thank you and leaves quickly. You catch a whiff, it's liver, still warm. You help. Antoine closed the shutters. He thanks you with a grunt, then sits on a barrel and removes one boot. It squelches. He doesn't flinch. He just tips it over, empties it, and slips it back on. As you leave, the butcher's district exhales behind you. The smells linger in. Your clothes, your skin, your mood. You realize Antoine doesn't even notice anymore. He doesn't smell like blood. He is blood. You walk away from Antoine's shop, rethinking every roast you've ever eaten. The stink clings to you like a jealous ghost, thick, metallic, and faintly meaty. But the air shifts as you turn the corner. There's something new now.
Something?
Floral, fruity, faintly horrifying. That's when you spot it. A modest building with a garlanded doorway, or a painted sign of a cherub holding a rose, and beneath it, a single word in gold script. Parfumer. Welcome to the olfactory war room. You step inside, and the smell hits you with all the subtlety of a punch wrapped in silk. It's beautiful and confusing. Notes of rose, citrus, crushed mint, cinnamon, amber, musk, animal funk, and something that smells like a church service. You blink. You may be hallucinating. This is where the scent arms race begins. The perfumer Monsieur Lafayette naturally is already mid-demonstration for a powdered wig and a crimson coat. He waves a blotter under the man's nose. He says proudly, is new. Composition of civet, narrowly, and something. Medieval, the man nods. Stronger, perhaps? Lafayette smiles. Always. Mainstream fact, 18th century perfumers were chemists, artists, and occasionally alchemists. Their goal? To bottle illusion, to rewrite your body in scent. Ingredients ranged from floral distillates to the disturbingly bodily ambergris whale vomit. Civet glandular secretions from a civet cat's nether regions. Musk extracted from the gland of a deer. Each vial held a mystery, a gamble, and occasionally a felony. You wander between shelves stacked with tiny bottles labeled in cursive, asterisk Jardin Sauvage, L'Indecence, Souvenir de Guerre, asterisk the names are evocative, the contents, dangerous. Historians still argue whether perfumers truly believed they could ward off illness with their blends, or if it was marketing genius. It's probably both. During plagues, doctors stuffed their masks with herbs and citrus peels. Aristocrats wore pomanders, tiny scent globes filled with cloves and wax. Perfume wasn't just fashion, it was strategy. You're handed a sample strip. You sniff at first, it's bergamot. Then a deep wave of something leathery, almost musky. Then horse saddle, it's oddly regale. Monsieur Lafayette notices your reaction, you see. Smell is a journey. Begin in the garden, you end in the hunt. You nod, eyes watering. A young assistant begins demonstrating the distillation process. A copper still bubbles in the back, steaming the essence from crushed petals, bark, and citrus peels. It smells like someone opened a flower shop inside a bakery and then spilled wine everywhere. Quirky detail? Because animal-derived bases were so expensive, perfumers often used decaying animal products as starter notes, aged fats. Bones, even spoiled milk, masked beneath layers of florals and spice. If you've ever thought a perfume smelled rich, now you know why. Probably began as something very dead. You lift a heavy glass stopper and inhale. Rose, absolutely. But underneath, there's something darker. Rot. No, too refined. But definitely fermented. You replace it quickly. Monsieur Lafayette beckons you to the counter. This, he says, pulling out a cobalt vial, is for those who do not want to be remembered by the eyes, only the nose. Sniff. It's like velvet. It's like cinnamon licked off an old painting. You immediately think of Versailles and the feeling of lace clinging to a sweaty neck. A woman enters the shop. Her cloak is damp from rain. She smells faintly of vinegar and dog. Lafayette waves his hands theatrically. Madame, you are dying. To be reborn. She sighs and points to a jar labeled Passion Diminuate. He dabs her wrists. The scent rises in the air, violet clove, and something so aggressively floral it borders on violent. She beams. She leaves. You glance around and realize the shop also sells fragrance accessories. Pomanders, scented gloves, wax tablets to hang in carriages, even perfumed playing cards. One box reads, asterisk for use at funerals or musical recitals. You're not sure which is more stressful. Another assistant walks by with a tray of raw ingredients. You recognize lavender, lemon peel, and a small glass pot of something gray and waxy. Ambergris, he whispers, with reverence. Quirky note, ambergris begins life inside the intestines of a sperm whale, usually wrapped around something sharp the whale can't digest, like a squid beak. After being vomited or excreted, it floats in the ocean for years, curing in the sun, before washing up like a treasure chest of stink. People sniff it and pay handsomely. Humans are complicated. You ask Lafayette if anyone complains about the funk. He smiles. There is no such thing as a bad smell. Only an unrefined one. He offers you a bottle of Tempete de Santo. You take one whiff and instantly taste your ancestors as you leave the shop. You realize you've been inside for over an hour. The city outside hits your nose like an insult. The perfume cloud around you begins to thin. Beneath it, the streets reassert themselves. Rainwater, fish guts, pipe smoke, a fresh pastry. And something you can't quite place but know too well. Still, for a brief, floral-splashed moment, you were something else. Someone else. You smelled like memory and mystery. Like wealth. Like denial. And now, you smell like all of that, plus the butcher's son. You've just survived an hour inside the most luxurious nose ambush of the century, and now the outside world seems even ruder for it. The perfume clings to you like a silk scarf dipped in ego, but it's losing ground fast to the ever-loyal. Smells of Parisian pavement. And just as you think your senses have finally plateaued, ready to dull into acceptance, you arrive at a location that makes everything prior feel like a scented candle shop. Welcome to the morgue. Yes, open to the public. That's not a joke. The morgue of 18th century Paris sat right near the Seine. And unlike modern mortuaries, it wasn't designed for privacy. No, this one was exhibition. A free show. The bodies of the unidentified, the drowned, the tragic, and the mysterious were laid out for public viewing, crime-solving as Sunday stroll. Mainstream fact, the Paris morgue. This became one of the city's most macabre tourist attractions. Was it meant to be entertainment? Exactly, it was for identification. But the line between mourning and morbid curiosity blurred quickly. People visited between errands. They brought children. Some came weekly like it was theater. But the scent, that was never entertainment. You approach the entrance. A board clerk sits near the door, munching on something that smells like pickled eggs. He waves you through with a nod, and the smell hits instantly. Even outside it seeps. A bouquet of river water, old meat, mildew, and something deeply human, not sweat, not filth, something deeper. The scent of stillness, of time, stopped and left to warm up slightly under glass. Inside, it's quiet. Rows of bodies lie on marble slabs behind a glass partition. You join a small group already, observing an old woman clutching her rosary. A baker's assistant, two young lovers whispering behind a lace fan. The air is thick and reverent, but also ... investigative. You don't speak. No one does. The only sound is the soft dripping of condensation and the occasional tap of a cane on stone. Quirky fact? Sometimes regulars would visit the morgue just to pass time. One man was so consistent, he was nicknamed Le Spectateur. He claimed the dead helped him think. Others used it for gossip. Did you see corpse number 3? I heard he was a butcher, caught in his own hook. No, a thief, drowned fleeing the gendarmes. The body became the city's canvas for imagination. Historians still debate whether the morgue's openness helped or hindered public health. On one hand, it raised awareness of mortality. On the other, it reeked. No real ventilation. Bodies laid out for days. Sometimes, if an identity was needed desperately, the corpse would be kept longer. You can imagine how that ended. You lean close to the glass. One man's skin has gone waxy, gray-blue, like spoiled cream. His clothes are still damp. Card? Rests on his chest, pulled from the river. No name. Feel a mix of things. Nausea, sadness, curiosity. Mostly, you feel your nostrils trying to shut themselves manually to combat the odor. Workers burned incense and vinegars, sometimes soaking cloths in herbs and hanging them near the bodies. It didn't work. The scent was bigger than spice. Had history, memory, finality. Someone next to you whispers, "That one looks like my cousin." A beat, but he had both ears. You nod, pretending not to have heard. In a far corner, a body lies beneath a sheet. A clerk explains that it's too decayed for viewing. "For staff only," he mutters. You're grateful. Window. The air shifts, and your stomach does a little curtsy. A fringe tidbit. Some viewers would leave flowers at the morgue. Not for the dead they knew, but for the dead they wished they had. Anonymous affection, poured into a corpse who looked tragic enough. Grief is projection. You step outside into the open air and inhale. It's not better, but it's different. The river laps lazily nearby, as if unaware it's just delivered. Its latest occupant. You sit on the edge of a low wall, watching the Seine for a moment. A barge floats past, loaded with crates. A gull screams overhead. Someone downriver is gutting fish. The city doesn't stop for the dead. It folds them in, absorbs them, moves forward. A couple exits the morgue behind you, holding hands. They laugh softly, like they've shared something intimate. Maybe they have. You rise and walk along the embankment, no still twitching with the ghost of formaldehyde and fungal wallpaper. The perfume from the shop earlier, long gone. The butcher's scent, now just a background hum. What lingers now is that morgue smell, deep, slow, and unhurried. And here's the thing no one tells you. You remember it. Not right away, but later. When the breeze hits just right, or you open an old trunk, or you pass a bakery that's gotten to hot tools, smell it again, and you'll think of Paris, and the people you never knew. You keep close to the river, trying to let the wind scrub your sinuses clean of the morgue's gentle death cloud. But Paris isn't done with you yet, not by a long shot, because now you're going underground, not metaphorically, literally. Into the soft-bellied dark of one of the city's strangest, coolest, and absolutely smelliest treasures. Welcome to the catacombs. The entrance is unassuming. A squat stone building with iron bars and a board attendant who waves you through like this is just another Tuesday. Inside, a spiral staircase winds downward. The walls sweat. The air cools, your breath fogs. And then you're there in a corridor of bones. You step into the tunnel and stop, because suddenly it's quiet. The city vanishes. The smell shifts. It's damp, mineral heavy, but clean in a way that feels old, like stone that's been soaking for centuries in history. And human dust. Mainstream fact. The Paris catacombs were created in the late 18th century to solve a very real, very gross problem. Paris's cemeteries were full, overflowing, bodies stacked in mass graves, decaying so badly they sometimes oozed into nearby buildings. It's not a metaphor. In 1780, a wall of less innocent cemetery literally collapsed, sending corpses into a neighboring basement. Dinner was canceled, so the city dug up the dead millions of them and moved the bones underground, into old limestone quarries beneath Paris. A tidy solution in theory. In practice, you're now walking through it. The bones are arranged with terrifying symmetry. Femurs stacked like logs. Skulls placed with eerie precision. Decorative. Ornamental, like someone said, let's make this horror a bit more aesthetic. You run your hand along the wall, dry, chalky, cold. The smell here isn't corpse. That part's long faded. Now it's something gentler, earthy, like a damp library made of silence. Quirky detail? Not all bones are accounted for. Some sections remain unorganized, literal bone pits where workers dumped whatever didn't fit the theme. And yes, there are legends of people getting lost in the catacombs and never returning. One man's body was found decades later, curled near an unused tunnel, his candle long extinguished. He's not on the tour brochure. You follow the corridor deeper. The air tastes ancient, like time calcified. A small alcove opens on your right. A plaque reads, Asterisk Arate, Cest ICI l'Empire de la Mort. Castoct, Cesta, this is the Empire of the Dead. Nice touch. You pause, not out of fear, but out of respect. Or maybe it's just the smell. Cool, like a root cellar filled with forgotten apples. Slightly metallic, slightly sweet. You breathe it in. And weirdly, it soothes you. Historians still debate whether the catacombs were meant to be a warning or a comfort. To remind the living of death, or to give the dead a better home. The fact that people now host secret concerts down here probably complicates the message. You pass a group of school children on a field trip. They giggle and poke at the skulls. Their chaperone glares. Respect the remains, she hisses. One boy sneezes. You don't ask what triggered it. Then you reach a side chamber labeled Osware Municipal. A small niche houses skulls with names still etched on the bone. One has a tooth still intact. Another bears a scrape that looks like a sword nick. Every skull here had a smell once. A voice. A bad haircut. They're just watching. The walls drip softly. The floor squishes slightly. You hope it's just condensation. But you've been in Paris long enough to know better. Quirky tidbit. In some parts of the catacombs, the rock itself absorbed so much organic material over the years that it smells faintly. Meaty. A kind of fossilized funk. Locals called it La Pierre Vivante, the living stone. It's not alive, but it remembers. You keep walking. The corridor narrows. Your torches. There are still torches in some areas flickers against the bone walls. The air grows colder, but not harsher. It's like the city above has been muted. Then a shift in scent, subtle. A note of mildew. Wet fabric. Maybe mold. You turn and find a section still being reinforced with modern stonework. The old bones behind it are exposed to a natural spring. The smell here is stronger, not bad, just forgotten. Like a book no one's opened in decades. You pause to tie your shoe, and as you bend, you realize something. The smell down here isn't aggressive. It's patient. Doesn't want attention, it waits. It lingers in the back of your throat like a story you half remember, but haven't told in years. As you climb the exit stairs spiral, endless you feel the weight of moisture in your clothes. The scent of the catacombs follows you, clinging to your hair, your sleeves, your breath. You step out into daylight, and Paris roars back. Horse manure, bread, smoke, soap, and all of it feels. Too fast, because now you've smelled the end of things. It was quieter than you expected. You blink into the daylight, and for a moment Paris feels too bright, too loud, too alive. The city above seems to mock the silence you've just emerged from. The catacombs are gone, swallowed back into the stone, and here you are, once again. On the surface where scent doesn't wait in the shadows, it declares itself loudly, aggressively, socially. Because now, it's time to look at Paris not as a mass of foul odors, but as a code, a ranking system, a social ladder built on stink. You're walking into the politics of the nose. You pass a man in tattered breeches pushing a cart of wet firewood. He smells like ash and sweat and desperation. Behind him, a woman in a ruffled bonnet walks briskly, leaving a trail of rosewater and vanilla. Out 2 worlds, 1 street. And the only thing separating them is their scent budget. Mainstream fact, in 18th century Paris, smell wasn't just sensory, it was identity. To smell sweet was to be respectable. To reek was to be suspicious. Scent determined how you were treated, how you were judged, even how you were punished. The perfume industry wasn't just fashion, it was reputation management. You cut through a narrow alley where the rich and poor live within arm's reach. A merchant's wife spritzes her gloves with orange blossom water before stepping outside. A beggar with a bandaged foot lies 3 feet away, reeking of pus and stale cabbage. No one sees him, but they smell him. That's enough. Historians still argue whether scent reinforced class divisions or was simply a result of them. But either way, it stuck. The poor were expected to stink. The rich were obligated to mask it. One group wore their scent like armor, the other like a curse. Quirky fact? Some churches in Paris had reserved pews based on how much perfume you wore. Sit too close to the altar smelling like a tannery, and you'd be gently redirected to the back where God could still hear you, but would keep his distance. You pass a baker's boy dashing down the street, his apron flapping behind him. He smells of yeast, soot, and child labor. A woman pulls her skirts aside as he passes. She scowls not at the boy, but at his scent trail. You start to realize everyone here carries an invisible banner of smell broadcasting their place. In the world, you duck into a wine shop for a moment. Inside, the air is thick with tannins, spilled dreams, and the faint vinegar sting of past arguments. A nobleman swirls his glass and talks loudly about fencing. Behind the counter, a man in a stained smock rolls his eyes. His apron smells of cork and sweat and something sour. I exist in the same room. Their odors keep them apart. You step back outside and walk toward a public fountain where a line of women are filling buckets. The water is technically free, but the scent of those in line tells you who's welcome. A girl with frizzed hair and cracked fingernails gets jostled out of place. Another, wearing a fresh sprig of thyme in her collar, is offered the front. Scent is currency. You catch a whiff of something peculiar. Sulfur and powder. A passing soldier. His boots are polished, but his jacket reeks of gunpowder and damp wool. People step aside not because of his uniform, but because of what he carries in his pores. The musk of violence. You stop at a perfume cart selling sachets and handkerchiefs pre-scented with respectable odors. Rose, clove, lavender, mint. The vendor winks. One whiff, and the magistrate forgets where you've been. You believe him? Quirky tidbit? Some people kept smell diaries, little books recording the scents they encountered, as if trying to map their lives by the nose. Fish market again, rotting quickly. Madame Dupont's hair smelled of lilacs today, in grief. It wasn't weird, it was survival. A small riot of smells erupts near a tavern. Inside, someone has spilled something strong. Outside, two drunkards bicker. Their breath alone could peel paint. You give them a wide berth. Further along, you pass a street cleaner with a cart full of ash and citrus peels. It smells like a battle between cleanliness and the inevitable. He tips his hat. You nod. His scent isn't pleasant, but it's earned. The reality of Paris is this. You are what you smell like. To stink of leather means work. To smell of lemon, influence, garlic, poverty, incense, piety, or performance, gunpowder, power, and if you smell like nothing at all, you're probably dead. Or rich enough to fake it. The social order isn't carved in stone, it's soaked into the fabric of people's clothes, into their bedsheets, their skin, their breath. Paris is a city not just of sights and sounds, but of scent stratification. You don't need to ask who someone is. You just inhale as you wind down a quiet street lined with laundry strung overhead.
Ow.
You can now read the city. That house smells of broth and soap, middle class, trying hard. That one? Burning meat and candle wax, old money with new problems? That alley? Urine, cabbage, and wet wool poverty with no pretense? The people of Paris walk like actors on, stage their scent, trailing behind them like a costume piece. The audience, everyone else's nose, and yours. You smell like all of it. A mixed message, a contradiction, which means you're starting to fit in. You know that feeling when a thunderstorm is about to hit? That breathless pressure in the air, the tingle on your arms, the scent of ozone and distant firewood? That's what Paris smells like now. Except there's no storm coming from the sky. It's coming from the people. Because the year is late. The bread is scarce. And the anger is rising like steam from an overboiled pot. You're walking into the cusp of revolution, and it stinks. You cross into the Faubourg Saint-Antoine, once a woodworking district, now a pressure cooker of grievance and sweat. The air smells of pine resin, stale beer, meat rinds, something less literal, frustration. You can almost taste it. Mainstream fact: the late 1780s saw France collapsing under debt. Drought, and a royal court that seemed increasingly allergic to empathy. Streets of Paris became more than just conduits for filth. They became conduits for fire. People gathered in cafes, cellars, alleys, and breadlines, and the air. It thickened with history. You pass a crowd shouting in front of a baker's shop. The bread has run out again. Ill. A woman clutches a crust like a medal. Another pushes forward, yelling something about her children. The baker shrugs. His apron smells like ash and defeat. Historians still argue whether the revolution was inevitable or ignited by specific moments in insult here. A hunger pang there. A bad smell that tipped someone's patience. Because scent was part of it. To the poor, the stink of the city wasn't just unpleasant. It was a reminder of who hoarded clean air. Of who got roses while others got rot. A group of boys runs past with sticks, chanting slogans. One carries a rat by the tail like a trophy. It smells exactly as you'd expect. You try not to make eye contact? Quirky tidbit? During the early uprisings, protesters would burn symbols of royalty, coats of arms, portraits, and yes, even perfume bottles. It was theatrical, and it smelled. Charred rosewater and scorched velvet aren't easy to forget. You move past a makeshift barricade made from broken carts and furniture. It smells like fresh pine, dried blood, and urine. Someone's tried to spray it with cologne. It didn't help, eh? Man in a tricorn hat gestures for you to help lift a barrel. You oblige. The barrel smells like wine turned mean. He smiles. To the Bastille tomorrow, eh? You nod. He doesn't know he'll be in a painting someday. You round a corner and find a tavern with windows cracked open. Inside, it's loud, heated, the scent is overpowering, spilt ale, muddy boots, unwashed bodies, and the faintest whiff of hope. A woman stands on a table, quoting Rousseau. She smells like onions and revolution. You step back into the alley, just as a small explosion, probably just a firecracker, rattles down the lane. Screams, laughter, and the collective intake of breath. You smell gunpowder now, unmistakable, metallic and sharp. The fuse is lit. Quirky detail. Some revolutionaries used scented gloves to identify one another secretly. A whiff of bergamot in the wrong quarter could mean trouble. Smell wasn't just a marker, it was a message. The night sets in Paris hums like a pulled violin string. Fires begin to burn in small iron stoves. The air fills with smoke, soup, sweat, and intention. You pass a window where a seamstress is stitching a red cockade. Her fingers are stained. Her face is lit by candlelight. Her room smells like beeswax, singed wool, and breath held too long. You walk along the Seine. The river reflects flickers of flame. Somewhere, a man is reading a pamphlet by torchlight. Somewhere else, a dog barks at nothing. City isn't sleeping. It's loading, and you can smell it. Everything has intensified. The usual background rot is now seasoned with adrenaline, with fear, with resolve. The scent of Paris is no longer just sewage and sweat. It's something charged. You spot a nobleman on horseback. He looks out of place. Perfumed, powdered, polished. The scent of jasmine and old money wafts behind him like a farewell letter. A child throws a cabbage at him. It misses. The nobleman disappears into the night, scent trailing like a ghost. Historians tell us revolutions are about ideas, that they're born in salons and manifestos. But you're here, and you know better. This one's born in the gutters, the smells no one could ignore anymore, and the shared stink of hunger and rage. You pass a bakery where someone's baking illegally, maybe. Hiding supplies, maybe just surviving. The scent is glorious and dangerous. You pause, inhale, and move on. The smell of fresh bread is no longer innocent. You reach a square where musicians are tuning up a drum, a fiddle, a kind of pipe. The air is ripe with anticipation and too many armpits. The music begins. People dance. People shout. You realize the party is part rally, part riot preview. It smells like wine, old socks, and political awakening. You sit on a stoop, boots soaked, shirt sour, nose exhausted, and then it hits you. This is the first time. Paris's stink doesn't feel oppressive. It feels revolutionary. Because when enough people share the same foul air long enough, something changes. They stop apologizing for it, and they start setting it on fire. You wake before dawn, still on that stoop, head heavy with sleep and soaked fabric. The air is quiet but not peaceful. It's the kind of silence cities make when they're holding their breath. The cobblestones are wet with dew and last night's regrets. Somewhere, a rooster crows. Somewhere else, someone groans awake with a hangover strong enough to challenge monarchy. And you take one last deep breath of 18th century Paris. It smells like wet wool and wine and charred wood, like victory, like vengeance. Like a city about to change its name to something blood-stained and aspirational. But most of all, it smells like the same city, layered, complex, putrid, alive. Paris may rise in rebellion, but it will still have trash in the streets. Still have onions in its breath. Still have a chamber pot balanced dangerously on a third-story WINDOWSILL. Mainstream. Fact, even after the French Revolution kicked into full gear, sanitation didn't magically improve. It would take Napoleon and decades of planning for Paris to begin laying the proper groundwork for a functioning sewer system. Till then, the city remained a perfume-splashed cesspit with better slogans. You rise and walk through the nearly empty streets. Market stalls are still shuttered. The fountains trickle quietly. A dog trots past carrying a boot. It's the first calm moment you've had in hours, and it smells tolerable, most sweet. Like a compost pile on a cool morning, rich with history, but not actively attacking you. Quirky detail. Some revolutionaries believed the scent of Paris should change with its politics. They experimented with patriotic scents made from local herbs and spices. Didn't last. People still preferred rosewater over fennel basil, eau de liberté. You passed the ruins of a bakery, still smoldering. Someone painted pain aux morts on the wall. Bread or death. A sentiment you can now taste in the air. Ash, yeast, defiance. The streets are littered with traces of last night's storm, KK'd in a puddle, a broken violin, a smear of something that was probably cheese and is now just urban camouflage. You smell it all, and as the sun begins to rise, Paris glows, not golden, but gray, stone and soot, history and human grease. The smell is less distinct now, not because it's gone, but because you've absorbed it. You carry it in your hair, your boots. Behind your eyes, historians like to romanticize this period, the age of enlightenment, spark of revolution, the glory of the people. But you've been here, and you know the truth. It reeked. It always reeked. Enlightenment came with foot. Rot. Liberty wore lice. Equality smelled like last night's stew reheated in someone's sock. You step into the cathedral square just as the bells begin to toll. The pigeons scatter. The city stirs. Bread carts creak into view. Laundry flaps. On lines, and the smell rolls back in, wave after loving wave. Manure, lavender, boiled fish, old beer, damp fabric, burning fat. This is Paris, not the clean, romantic fantasy, but the real one. And now, as your tour ends, you climb the steps of a bell tower and look out across the rooftops. The wind lifts. You breathe it in. You smell the Seine. You smell the bakeries. You smell the ghosts. And underneath it all, layered so deep it's almost invisible, you smell the centuries, the revolutions, the lovers, the stink of a million feet walking toward. Something better? That smell? That's the long memory of a city, and it's not letting go. The bells grow distant. The streets below blur into quiet movement. You're still on that rooftop, but the city softens around the edges. The light shifts from gray to gold, and the air begins to lose its bite. Everything slows down. The smells fade to not entirely. Just enough. The strong edges of vinegar and rot settle into the background. The sour sharpness of the street stalls, the musty cellars, the burning tallow, they all grow gentle. It's like the city is tucking itself in, wrapping its stories in silken smoke. You walk back down the bell tower, each step softer than the last. Your boots no longer squish. The floor is no longer cold. Your breath grows steady. You pass the Catacombs again in your mind. The perfume shop. The butcher's son. The market. The morgue. The rain-soaked alleyways. But now they're quiet scenes in a dream already beginning to dissolve. The city is still there, of course. Paris never leaves. It lingers in the background, whispering in smells, just like it did for everyone who ever walked these same streets. Their scent mixed into the mortar, the dust, the very air, and as you find your bed reel or imagined aunt, pull the blanket up. The smells of the past drift further away, soft, faint, distant. You're safe now. You've made it through. The stink won't follow you. Just rest. You did good. End of script. Sweet dreams.